Hello and welcome to another episode of a Wicked Parley. Oh my god, we made it to 101, man.
We are finally here.
Yeah,
101.
that's true.
It took a long time, but we are finally here. Woohoo! Thank goodness.
Yeah, well, hey, thanks for the people who watch the show. I appreciate you guys.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, never know when these things can happen. Well, I got some exciting announcements for everybody. So in a couple of weeks, I will be happy to introduce two potential new guest co-hosts for the show. I came across some wonderfully talented and good people that I think have a lot to offer and a lot to say and a lot to contribute. And I think we'll create some engaging content where we'll be able to kind of discuss issues from multiple perspectives. And so I'll look forward to being introduced to them and seeing some of the future content in the weeks to come. Also, I gotta say this now, it's the holiday season. We're getting rapidly approaching Christmas. We got what, I think it's 8 days to Christmas, yeah?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Because next week is Christmas Eve.
Yeah, so there won't be an episode on Christmas Eve.
That'd be family time.
Yes, sorry, people.
That'd be chillaxing time.
Yeah, I know we've been sporadic when it comes to our episodes recently. There have been a lot of behind the scenes complications, and it's been a mess. But I want you to know that we have straightened out a lot of those particular issues, and we will be producing content regularly, moving on past the holidays. It'll be much more regular. And look forward to more content than normal. We're going to try and expand in the next year. So
we have a lot of ideas.
Yes. And so if you guys have any suggestions or any things that you think would be great things for us to consider, feel free to email us at awickedparley@gmail.com and let us know your suggestions if you have any. We're also going to be doing another episode of just kind of questions and stuff, and questions and answers. And so if you guys want to have your question asked, and potentially answered, hopefully it's appropriate, people, keep it appropriate.
Then, come on.
Yeah, then feel free to send us those questions. And we'll be probably airing it sometime in January. So feel free to send in those messages whenever you get a chance. And I hope that you guys all have a wonderful and happy holiday with your families. It's important. With all that being said, I want to point out that this episode is going to be kind of a little bit more chaotic than normal. So be prepared for some wackiness, of course. But
yes,
I want to address this. Have you ever been driving, or perhaps just traveling somewhere? Maybe you're a passenger, and you see some guy or girl, a person driving in a way that challenges your perception or belief in God or in the world, or have in good faith, because this person is driving erratically for no reason, or more commonly decides that the rate of traffic is moving at 45 miles an hour. I'm going to go into the fast lane and drive 35. It ain't going to cause a problem at all. It's going to be fine. It's going to totally be fine. It's not. It's not fine. I used to think that I was just unlucky, that this was like a random chance, kind of thing. And then, I just was the unfortunate brunt of some sort of perhaps sick joke. And then it dawned on me the fact that this happened with increasing frequency. There was just, a ridiculous amount of times I would be driving and see this happen, and then particularly see this happen during the holidays. And then it dawned on me, maybe there's malicious intent to this. Or, or it's just simply a lack of awareness and common sense. And so I want to know in the comment section below, have you ever been responsible for creating a problem in that kind of situation? Or have you ever thought of doing that? Because I know I have.
Same.
Okay. So I wanted to kind of talk about the fact that, like, in all seriousness, the idea, the sense of common sense, as it were, seems to be going away. I don't see it being practiced commonly anymore, and I think there's a lot of reasons potentially why.
Such an oxymoron.
I know, right? It's totally an oxymoron. But I mean, before we even really get into that, I want to define specifically what common sense is to me. So that way we can ground the conversation in...
We can have a basis. We can have the fundamental core.
Yeah, you'll know where I'm coming from. So why don't you go ahead and throw that up there, Rose?
Yes. Common sense. It's just this first one, right here,
Mm-hmm.
Just the basic level of practical knowledge and judgment that we all need to help us live in a reasonable and safe way. With what happened to me last Monday,
Oh, man. Well, if we have time, I'll ask you about that. Mm-hmm. When it comes to, like, the general idea of common sense, the various people that are pro to the... excuse me, I can speak. Various people who are a part of creating episodes, we kind of were kicking around, okay, what is our definition of common sense? Because I think a lot of people kind of, like, they have their own definitions for certain words, and sometimes they're in the ballpark, sometimes they're not. Mm-hmm. But I think, like, every single person that we discussed this with kind of all was like, we had arrived at basically the same exact answer, which was things that people commonly are aware of or know how to do that doesn't need to have too much explaining and is relatively easy to interpret if you're observing it. That was
kind of, you look at it, it's like, yeah, that pretty much makes sense. Why didn't you think of it before? Because it's supposed to be common.
Yeah. And honestly, like, I mean, I feel like sometimes when I talk about this, I feel like it's like, okay, I don't want to talk down to you guys because, like, I mean, I know every person who spends time watching the show. I know you guys are smart people. I know a lot of you guys personally. I know that like you guys are good.
Intelligent beings.
Yeah, and I also know that like the people who know Rose also are intelligent people. So when I say like this kind of stuff and I'm talking about this, no, I'm not thinking of you guys as lacking this.
It's everyone else.
It's not okay. It's not everyone else. We're not gonna go with absolutes here. But what I'm gonna say is that there is a very large, alarmingly large.
Increasing?
No, not increasing. I don't want to think about it like that. I just want to say there's a large population that seems to lack common sense, and I think there's a lot of reasons for perhaps why that might be. Now, I think the first thing that comes to mind. Comes to me mostly because it's I want to make an argument, right? I want to like play like a lawyer, like a defense attorney, be like, okay, what potential thing could possibly exactly? We'll play devil's advocate. What could be going on here that could describe this? And really, I kind of came up with like nothing. Like I was like I was at a loss, and then all of a sudden it kind of hit me like lightning, right? I'm like, it's arrogance. Like it had to be arrogance. Like it had to be simply like I just don't give a fuck about anything. And so I came across an article on the website Sci Mechanics, and it's an interesting website that has a few kind of cool ideas. And as I was going through it, I'm like, this is really applicable to common sense as an explaining for why this seems to go away a little bit. And so I figured if you guys are interested, maybe you give it a read. And as you go through it, you'd eventually figure out, oh, I can see how he's connecting the dots. Or at least you can go, oh, I can see how that is. Even if you may already think you know, which I would not put past many of you. Because like I said, you guys are all, most people who I know who watch the show, very smart people.
It'd be good to just reiterate and just, make sure what we're thinking is correct, though.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, like...
Always good to be proven.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think the base argument of this whole thing when it comes to arrogance and how it's interconnected to common sense is the fact that many people who would practice common sense are going to utilize certain things from an assumption basis. And that assumption basis has certain working principles in mind. And a lot of them kind of have their hands in multiple things that we'll kind of get to later on in the episode. But
Okay.
in pertaining to the particular article that's here at hand, the main thing is the fact that when a person is arrogant, they lack the ability to be considerate of other people, and they do not take into consideration in the moment the actions that they're taking and how the reasons behind them may indirectly affect others. That's more or less what you're going to see here, and it gets repeated with multiple points. You know, like the first point they have here is that you've done great things, right? And you know, you think that like because you were successful in something, because you were like, oh hey, I did
Especially.
this, yeah, I led my my sports team, you know, baseball team, basketball team to victory.
I was the
achieved-
leader. I
Yeah.
was the all-star.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw up with that.
Yeah, you have achieved some sort of great level of success, that because of this success that you must be successful in all things you do, and it gives you an air of superiority. That level of arrogance in my mind could be a reasonable explanation for why people seem to lack common sense, because if you do something that is supposed to be okay, I'm doing what makes the most sense, I'm doing something that's considered correct, something that's considered accurate, and then I have no one to be my effective Jiminy Cricket, as it were. There's no,
Voice on your shoulders.
huh?
The good voice on your shoulders.
Yes, exactly. Then you kind of are going to fall into a couple different traps, one of which is an echo chamber, which we see all the time online, right?
Mm-hmm. So many.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have you heard people basically spout pretty harmful jargon at people?
Mm-hmm.
And then they just believe that they're right because every person that they talk to basically believes the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And if somebody says differently, they are yeeted
Yeah,
out, essentially,
they're-
whether it be threatening or banning or kicking.
Yeah, I mean, Elon Musk gets a lot of shit in the news because of what he's doing with Twitter, but I kind of feel like that what he's done is actually kind of been a good thing, because he kind of exposed the hypocrisy of so many elements of social media, and the fact that like they literally can just be like, cool, you don't have a voice anymore, you don't matter, since so much of our lives, sir, like are literally done online now. All right, like I don't really believe there's a way to get around this argument. For years, I was like, I don't want to be on Facebook. I don't want to be on MySpace. I don't want to be on any of these things. And I know MySpace, wow, he's old. But like, I mean, I wanted nothing to do with anything. You know, like Pinterest, Twitter, etc. Right? And I felt more isolated because I wasn't participating in these things. So because I wasn't participating in these things, when people were like, oh, you don't do that? That's weird. It's like, I'm automatically...
It's like in an attempt to, get away from the toxicity, the stuff.
Yeah.
Just...
Yeah, and at least, to me at least, I felt like it became taboo. It became taboo to think that it was okay to live my life outside of online. And it was taboo to talk about subjects that surrounded this particular thinking or challenged this kind of thinking.
Yes.
And
It's unfortunate.
And I honestly, like, I spent some time this week thinking about this particular concept quite a bit. I went through books and I was trying to find connections to things. And the thing that I felt like made the most sense of all the things that I came across actually came from a book that I haven't fully read yet. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you guys. So I'm not going to be like standing here and go, yeah, I read the whole thing. Spot on. But what I did read was of it, which was part of it. It was called The Knowledge Machine, Irrationally Created Science. And it kind of is like a complete... I guess the way to put this is that it kind of critiques the scientific method. And it does it in a way that I think kind of is important. And that is the fact that they make a decent argument, from at least what I've read, of them effectively evaluating the iron rule and seeing what happened to people who basically like were removed from the iron rule itself. And I'm not sure how many people know what the iron rule is, but I'm going to give you the kind of rundown of what the iron rule is effectively. It is a strict tenet of the scientific process by which critical evaluation happens. You can think of it kind of like the basic principles that allow certain scientific thoughts to be addressed and challenged, and therefore gain validity through the testing of these particular ideas and the repeating of certain experiments that find the same results every time they're tested and challenged, and they succeed, and that they're repeatable, they do the same exact thing, exactly what was expected, then they gain greater validity, which makes them essentially the stronger case for them to be correct.
So you're thinking this is the case for why we're losing common sense? Is not the case? What's up?
Well, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. And let me explain this part of this, all right? The iron rule at least the last 60 years, virtually every element of scientific progress that we have seen has bent the iron rule in one way or another. And because it's bent the rule, there's a trickle-down effect that happens throughout all of society. You can see this from churches. When religious beliefs were heavily done, you routinely see that the actions of the faith directly impacted the people whom believed it in their daily lives. And with science kind of taking up the position of religion in some ways in the modern day, I think you see the exact same effect kind of happen. And the thing is that if it becomes okay to bend the rule to allow something to become, I guess, scientifically proven, then at what point does bending the rule no longer apply? And I think this goes, and might be a kind of a stretch, but I think it goes all the way back to considering common sense. I think when it comes to arrogance and common courtesy and things along those lines, I genuinely believe that those particular circles have overlap that explains some of the effects that we witness. And that's kind of how I kind of connect the dots here. Because if you really think about what common sense really is, right? It is repeatable, easy to explain knowledge that is put into practice or put into the service of an individual frequently. And because that's the case, it kind of doesn't really allow for too much to kind of interact with it unless you're willing to bend the rules. And that's what I kind of am getting at. That's what I kind of think is what's going on. So, I mean, after hearing that kind of like a statement, I know it's a little long-winded here. What is your thoughts on this?
Let's see. So because people are breaking those rules, you're saying, just to reiterate, so you're saying when people bend and break those rules rather than following it essentially religiously, it's leading to these opportunities to just, deprive of common sense?
I would say yes, but I think the most important element that needs to be probably stated on top of that maybe I just kind of forgot to say, was the fact that scientific people are leaders in their fields. And because they're leaders in those fields, they are necessary for gaining trust, for gaining a sense of duty, and they have a level of notoriety in the communities that they're a part of. And so the communities trust that the opinions that are shared and the stuff that's conducted based on the science is going to be correct. And the fact that the bending of the rules happens in those credible realms that imply respect and authority, and I would say even a level of reverence to some extent, absolutely don't occur in the way that they probably ought to. And I think that trickling of effects of those types of impulses, those types of specific actions, I think lend itself to other things being misused and misappropriated, and I think ultimately coming down to even the simple things like common sense.
Okay. Yeah, I can see where that's coming from. Especially if it's bent too often or too much without any, consequences. They think it's okay. Which means, unfortunately, what could be thought of, well, to me, sometimes the lack of common sense, and I am fully, a victim and a perpetrator of this, too. Sometimes just the lack of common sense is just sheer stupidity sometimes.
I mean...
that hasn't been corrected.
I would say this, I think every person at some point or another does something stupid.
Yeah.
I think that,
Me included.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think it's part. We're all human. We all do it, right? But I think it's the frequency of stupid things. You know what I mean? I think it's the frequency that it occurs, and the effect that it has that allows for it, right? If someone makes a stupid mistake, all right, but it happens, pretty rarely. It doesn't necessarily have to even be once. It could be more than once. But it doesn't happen. It's not like every time you see it, like, oh, that's another stupid mistake. Ah, this guy's stupid. It's not like that. It's more like, okay, like a couple times a year. All right.
Okay.
You're not thinking he's stupid.
You think he had an off day?
Yeah, he's just having a bad day, right? And I think that like this kind of thinking, like it extenuates itself in ways that I don't think are fair, really, for either of us to really discuss in any real great depth, if I'm gonna be truly honest about it, because it's so dynamic. Like there are so many layers to this particular kind of like layer of thinking, or this way of thinking, that I think it, and I could be kind of like, dancing around this a little bit, but I think that because so many people are connected to the way in which we present knowledge, that by corrupting the scientific process at the high end of knowledge, then by the time you get to the simpleton knowledge, you could say it like that. I mean, like the basic tiers of knowledge, you there's some sort of lasting disconnect between certain concepts, and then knowledge just gets lost because there's no way for the person to be able to integrate it in a way that they can understand. And it makes me think that, like, especially like when it comes to like common sense things that we do right now, right?
Yes.
How many people can start a fire that you know? And keep in mind, folks,
Only
Rose knows tons of people.
I know a lot.
Yeah,
I
hundreds.
know a lot with my job. Out of those I know outright versus just, speculating that they could.
I just say speculations are included because, like, we know the numbers low.
Included?
Yeah, we know. Yeah, speculations are included.
I'd say only a handful.
A handful out of hundreds, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, do you think that like starting a fire maybe 100 years ago was common knowledge?
More common knowledge than it is today.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But like 100 years ago, it depends on, it probably depends on what area, but
I would say I would argue that today, if you were to scoop up 20 people in a city,
yes,
and you asked,
in a city,
and you asked them, hey, I want you to start a fire with these two sticks.
Okay.
I'd be willing to bet that no one would even know friction is the force behind what starts the fire in the first place, because science isn't properly demonstrated today to the youth. And I would be shocked if any of them could really actually start a fire. Like, I would be shocked. And I think that, like, if you took people from a rural community and you did this exact same experiment, I would say that it is fairly reasonable to expect that you would see a decent percentage. I would say I would expect at least a quarter of them would know how to start a fire from just the friction of two sticks. And I see Jacket there talking in the text a whole hell of a lot. All right.
Yes, I have been encouraging the discussion.
I see it
as best as I can.
I see it, and I think it's funny. I think that when I say starting a fire, what I'm specifically referring to is starting a fire without having to utilize technology. Mm-hmm. All right, we're not talking about someone who has like a lighter.
We're talking like modern technology versus just like old primal technology.
Yeah, I'm talking about like you're needing to survive. You're in nature. You don't have matches. You don't have a lighter, and you need to get a fire going. You don't have access to rubbing alcohol. All right, you don't have matches, and so like to me, like I think that it's incredibly important that these skills are there. But I also, what I'm trying to point out is the fact that as time passes, what the information that society thinks is important and is considered common knowledge changes as the society evolves. I don't think it's very surprising, but I think that we should be taking notice of it, because I think the skills that are becoming common knowledge today are not skills that are practical for survival. They're practical for thriving in the environment of the now, which we know is ephemeral in nature. And the reason we know it's ephemeral in nature is because no previous version of common sense has traditionally made it all the way from its inception to today in the way it was started. There are things that are similar that are considered common sense, but I think that most things that are considered common sense are common sense to us now. They're not common sense to us, you know. I mean, like, let's take another example. Let's throw another example in there, right?
Okay.
It's common sense that the first thing you do in getting into a car is to put on your seatbelt.
Yes.
How long have seatbelts laws been around?
Don't ask me that. My history is terrible.
Well, I'm going to put you this way. They vary from state to state, but loosely speaking, seatbelt laws started becoming into effect in the late 70s, early 80s. All right?
Goodness.
So what about cars in the 50s?
Yeah,
what was the common sense then?
Don't drive like a maniac, hopefully.
Well, you know, I would say, like, what happened, or avoid the maniac that comes into you, right? I mean...
Yeah, that too. It's like, you can be a great driver. Doesn't account for everybody else who might not be.
Yeah, so, like, I think that, like, there are some things that, like, you have to take into consideration. I think common sense is one of those things. I think the reason why common sense is going away is because what I see as common sense and what many of my peers see as common sense is really not what the modern person considers as common sense, because we're getting older. We're no longer being associated with the same...
It's no longer matching.
Group. Yeah, we're no longer seeing the same group. And I think that's kind of where it comes down to at the end of the day, right? I think that really it's an argument, right? On one end, you can really say that, hey, the iron rule, you know, science, our leadership is flexing, is bending the knee, as it were, is allowing certain things to be altered, so it has a trickle-down effect. And you could say, okay, that's one reason. The other reason you could say is that, well, because language evolves, and because it changes over time, that this could explain why we see this, because we're no longer part of the common norm, relative common sense. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'm alarmed either way. Like, I am disturbed on either one of those things, if either of them are accurate. Because I think being wise with your resources that allows you to thrive, allows you to succeed, that's important. And if it's not common sense, then what the hell? And if really everyone is just being arrogant and practicing things like, you know, they're the only one who matter. They're the only people who matter in this world. And that's their perspective first. They indoctrinate or believe in the idea of American exceptionalism, for instance, for Americans out there who are considered themselves as number one. Any of those things are really alarming, because, you know, do you really want to live in a society where everyone's just treating them like, kind of like they're all assholes to everybody? You know, like...
They all think they're the king or queen or whatever the heck. Yeah,
like... What happens about living in harmony? You know, I know that sounds such a boomer thing to say, right? But, like, it's a beautiful concept in its nature. You know, there should be a level of harmony that should be acceptable and should be okay. And I take issue with the fact that the world today wants to just shit on that. You know, like, I mean, like, that's how I look at it. I think that they're being disingenuous to the people, because I don't think that people who basically are arrogant are going to live happy lives. They're not going to be fulfilled. They're going to wake up when they're 40 or they're 50 years old, and they're going to be surrounded by a couple of people who just cared a lot about them, right? Maybe they were the people who were able to take advantage of the most of whatever that person's success was, whatever that the circumstances be. But they'll go out into the world and they will want to make a point. They will want to try and reach out. They want to affect. They want to help. And there'll be no one. There'll be no one who wants to interact with them because they were such assholes. And then they spread this idea of me first. And so I think that, like, with either side of the argument that you look at when it comes to the challenging of common sense, the one true thing that I can point to at the very least is that if you want to live in a world that makes sense to you, then share the knowledge you have with your peers. And make sure that your peers try their best to share that knowledge with their peers. And through a grassroots kind of movement of sorts, spread a more positive, more helpful message where everyone's able to communicate at the same level. Don't be changing words, don't be treating people with disrespect.
Life is already hard enough. Don't make it harder.
Exactly. Yeah. Just go in there with like, hey, this is what matters. The issue of common sense is an issue that isn't going to go away anytime soon. This is not an issue that we're going to be able to kind of like throw out. And I think like this is an issue that we'll probably circle back to in the future. And so if this is an episode or a topic that you'd like to hear discussed again, or perhaps you have something to say about it, then feel free to contact the show in whatever way you feel is best, whether it be through our Discord, our email, privately messaging one of us if you know us personally. But let us know. Let us have an actual conversation about this, because I do really think that common sense is actually going away, at least in a way that I think is important for people. I also want to kind of ask a couple other last questions before we wrap this up. The main question I have for you guys is, do you guys want to see the Wheel of Challenge return?
Oh, gosh.
If you want to see the Wheel of Challenge return, hit the thumbs up button, please, because that's important for the YouTube algorithm. Like the video. If you can, subscribe if you aren't. Share with your friends. Share with your family. We're going to be doing absolutely everything we can to make the show awesome in the months and years moving forward. We're not going anywhere. I am dedicated to making sure that this channel is awesome in every way it can be. And I'm dedicated to you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your passions. And I appreciate your support. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful and happy holidays. I'll see you in the next one, everybody. Good night.